It only takes a single spark to ignite a prairie and just one desperate choice to break a man. The orchard burned fiercely that night, flames twisting upward in a crimson rage, devouring generations of dreams stored in branches and soil. A man stood at the edge of his property, soot smeared across a face etched by sun and sorrow, feeling the heat sear his soul as fiercely as his land. Debts, drought, betrayal each had stripped him down until nothing remained but the bitter taste of ashes. Beyond the smoke, headlights pierced the darkness, coming for what was left. He clenched his fists, knowing that sometimes kindness is answered with fire, and mercy is repaid with ruin. Tonight, the line between hope and devastation had blurred forever, and the only road left was the hardest one he would ever walk. Adam Dawson woke before the sun crested the hills, the same way his father and grandfather had done on this land for generations. Only now, what once was a vibrant farm in the rolling hills of Maple County looked more like a war zone of cracked soil and abandoned equipment. A 5-year drought had stripped the land's spirit, and each dawn, Adam felt as though he rose to do battle against an enemy he couldn't see. With his wife gone lost to a sudden illness 3 summers prior, Adam shouldered both the heartbreak and the burden of maintaining Dawson Farm alone, except for his teenage daughter, Grace. This particular morning, Adam stood at the splintered edge of the porch. The wood beneath his work boots creaked ominously. He scanned the horizon, searching for even a whisper of moisture in the air. Nothing but dryness and dust. His tractor had broken down a week earlier, leaving him to haul supplies in an aging pickup that sputtered with every gear shift. Stacked on the passenger seat were overdue mortgage notices, each one stamped with the county's final warning: if he couldn't pay by the end of the month, the farm would face foreclosure. Adam's plan, if it could be called, that involved driving into town to trade a half-quart of firewood for enough goat feed to keep his small herd alive until, hopefully, the bank gave him an extension. Every day he delayed brought him and Grace closer to losing the only home they'd ever known. Inside the house, Grace stirred in the kitchen, 17 years old, freckled, and possessing a quiet determination that reminded Adam of her late mother. She tried her best to keep hope alive. She placed a hand-me-down backpack by the door. Inside were textbooks for her junior year, plus scholarship applications that asked for essays, references, and proof of extracurricular involvement. The trouble was, the local 4-H group had dwindled to almost nothing, and the county's main livestock fair had been canceled 2 years running due to the drought. Grace wanted to become a veterinarian. She believed in the farm's role as a caretaker of animals, big and small. But without funds, college was just another dream drifting away like the topsoil in the wind. Adam loaded the last of the split firewood into the truck's bed, looping twine around it and tugging twice to make sure it held tight. He wiped sweat from his brow, even though the sun had barely cleared the ridge. The orchard that once bore apples enough to feed neighbors and bring in extra income was a row of brittle branches, leaves shriveled into pale ghosts. Where he used to plant soybeans, the earth had cracked into deep furrows large enough to catch a boot heel. In the distance, a hawk circled overhead, scanning for a meal, crows or mice, anything that might be scraping by in the dusty gloom. As he climbed into the cab, Adam tried not to let the hush of defeat settle in. "One more run," he whispered, as if praying. "Just one more run, and maybe tomorrow." Grace squeezed his hand through the open window. "I'll watch the goats. Drive safe." He nodded. The engine coughed to life, and the pickup rattled down the gravel driveway. Ahead lay 15 miles of back roads twisting through Maple County, each mile echoing with memories of a happier past. Little did Adam know that before the day was out, he would find something on that roadside that might change his fate and the entire valleys forever. Adam guided the pickup through the early morning haze, radio silent because the tuner knob had snapped off last month. He kept the windows rolled down to catch any stray breeze. The smell of hay and faint diesel smoke clung to his flannel shirt, scents that spoke of simpler times and honest labor. Around the third bend past the old apple orchard, he spotted hazard lights blinking on the shoulder. A sleek black SUV, definitely out of place in these parts, tilted at a precarious angle. Rear tire shredded to ribbons. Normally, Adam might have driven by, worn down by his own troubles. But something about seeing a stranded vehicle on this lonely stretch triggered the old Dawson code: you help your neighbor, or a stranger, if they need it. So he slowed to a crawl and parked behind the SUV. As he stepped out, dust swirled around his boots. A woman emerged from the driver's side, wearing jeans, a denim jacket, and a baseball cap that shielded her eyes from the sun. She had an air of city polish about her, but her posture spoke of anxiety, like she didn't quite belong here and wasn't sure what to do. "Morning," Adam said, his southern drawl more pronounced when he was nervous. He noticed her biting her lip, phone in hand, likely searching for a signal that didn't exist this deep into the hills. "Thank God," she exhaled, offering a tentative smile. "I heard a loud pop, and then I was on the rim. My spare's somewhere in the trunk, but I've never changed a tire in my life." Adam nodded, walking to inspect the damage. The tire was indeed gone, steel cords visible like barbed wire. He motioned to his pickup. "I got a jack and a 4-way lug wrench. Let's see what we can do." As he opened the SUV's rear hatch, a guitar case tumbled forward, nearly smacking him in the shin. Stickers plastered its surface: Grand Ole Opry, Austin City Limits, Red Rocks. Adam recognized the big names, but not the significance. He set the case aside carefully. The woman shifted on her feet, her face partially hidden beneath the cap, as if she hoped he wouldn't ask too many questions. She knelt beside him, trying to be helpful. He showed her how to loosen the lug nuts. She fumbled but managed to at least keep hold of the wrench. "I appreciate this. I'm Charlotte," she added quietly, almost as an afterthought. "Charlotte Hayes." He introduced himself in turn, explaining he was from just a few miles up the road, though you wouldn't know it from the state of the farmland. After lifting the SUV with a heavy groan of the jack, he swapped out the wheel with practiced efficiency. Charlotte stood back, arms crossed, clearly uneasy but grateful. When he was done, she produced a crisp $100 bill from a worn leather wallet. Adam waved it away. "No need for that," he said. "Folks around here stop and help when they can. That's just how it is." A flicker of relief and something else: admiration, crossed her eyes. She tucked the bill back, rummaging for a business card instead. "Well, miss, if you ever need something," she started, but Adam merely gave a polite nod. He had no idea that Charlotte Hayes was a world-touring country artist, nor that her name graced the top of the charts. He only saw a stranded traveler he'd helped, the same way he would for anyone. With that, Charlotte thanked him again, and Adam returned to his pickup. As he drove away, a strange feeling tugged at his chest, a sense that fate had nudged him. Meanwhile, Charlotte stood on the roadside, holding that card she never got to hand over, watching a worn pickup rattle off into the distance. She wondered if, in her search for clarity away from fame, she had just stumbled upon exactly what she needed. Pulling up to Wilcox Feeds an hour later, Adam still felt the echo of that unusual roadside meeting. The store's gravel lot was nearly empty. Charlie Wilcox, a gruff older man with kind eyes, helped Adam unload the split firewood in exchange for several sacks of goat feed. "Saw you in the distance?" "Dawson," Charlie said, arching a brow. "Who was that you stopped for a big fancy SUV? Odd sight in Maple County." Adam shrugged. "Just a traveler named Charlotte. Had a blown tire. Figured I'd help." Charlie nodded with a knowing half-smile. "You always did have a soft spot for strays, human or otherwise." He let the matter drop, but Adam sensed an undercurrent. Folks around here were suspicious of outsiders, especially outsiders rolling in new, expensive vehicles. After loading the feed sacks into the truck, Adam made a quick detour to the bank, intending to beg for an extension on his mortgage. The bank's interior was all fluorescent lights and stale coffee smell. Ms. Kellerman, the loan officer, gave him a long, sympathetic look. She'd known the Dawsons her entire life. "Adam," she said softly, glancing at the backlog of notices, "we can only offer so many extensions. The next board meeting is in 2 weeks. And after that..." He nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "I understand. I just need a little more time." Driving home, He heard the distant drone of an approaching thunderstorm, but the sky remained heartbreakingly clear. A phenomenon locals had joked about all summer thunder with no rain, just a teasing sky echoing with empty promises. By the time he reached the farm, the goats bleated in hungry greeting. Grace rushed out to help him unload the feed. They ate supper in silence. A simple meal of beans and the last jar of homemade salsa Grace's mother had canned 2 years ago. Adam felt a pang of guilt and sorrow every time he tasted that tangy blend. Memories of better days, when his wife's laughter filled every corner of the house, pressed in on him. Now, the corners felt hollow, and the overhead light flickered ominously. Grace mentioned she found new scholarship forms online. Some require a video essay, she explained, eyes shining with hope. I might film it out in the pasture. Show them the goats. Talk about community veterinary care. Adam forced a supportive smile. He desperately wanted Grace to have a future beyond these dusty fields. But how? The money was gone, the land was failing, and no miracle seemed forthcoming. That night, as he lay awake, Adam couldn't shake the feeling that meeting Charlotte Hayes meant something more than a casual roadside kindness. He didn't yet know she was an acclaimed country singer. All he knew was the sincerity in her eyes when she realized he wouldn't take her money. Like she hadn't met many people who simply did good deeds. Still, daydreaming about fleeting connections wouldn't save the farm. The threat of foreclosure lurked, and the days on the calendar were sprinting toward that final notice. If no solution arrived soon, Adam and Grace would be forced to leave, abandoning the Dawson legacy to the bank's auctioneers, or worse, a faceless agribusiness giant. He closed his eyes, imagining the house boarded up, the goats sold, the orchard bulldozed into oblivion. Sleep came hard, bringing nightmares of cracked land and swirling dust that matched the hollow ache in his chest. 2 days later, Adam was in the barn, mending a busted fence rail, when he heard the distant crunch of tires on gravel. He stood up, wiping sweat from his brow. The sleek black SUV eased into his yard, so incongruous against the weathered farmhouse. Out stepped Charlotte Hayes again, this time with a shy smile and a single guitar case slung over her shoulder minus the stickers. She raised a hand in greeting. "Hope I'm not intruding," she said, looking around at the goats rummaging for scraps of grain. Well, I went to the feed store looking for you. Charlie said to try your farm." Adam's gut twisted with curiosity and mild apprehension. "Everything okay with your tire?" She smiled. "All good there." "Actually, Bartham," Charlotte paused. "I wanted to thank you properly, and also talk about something else. You were so decent to me, and I couldn't stop thinking about it." He nodded, but didn't invite her in right away. Something in her tone suggested bigger news than just gratitude. Charlotte glanced at the orchard behind the barn-barren branches and dusty ground. "Is it always this dry out here?" she asked softly. Adam let out a weary laugh. "Not always. Used to be fertile land. Now can't seem to catch a break." Charlotte studied him for a moment, then lifted her guitar case. "I'm a singer. Country music. The real kind, I like to think. Before it got so glitzy. I've been on tour for years. Burned out. Honestly, I was driving around trying to find some perspective, and I found you. I also have a friend, Trevor, who produces a small documentary series. He's helped me do behind-the-scenes videos before. We've been talking about shining a light on struggling family farms." Adam's brow furrowed. He felt a flicker of tension. "I don't know about cameras and all that. I'm not one for the spotlight." Charlotte nodded slowly. "I figured, but hear me out. Trevor's crew is small. They help fix up a place, some sponsor tie-ins, a bit of fundraising. We keep it authentic, showing people how hard it is to maintain a farm like this. You'd get repairs, some exposure to potential donors. Maybe enough to catch up on the mortgage. People love a good comeback story. And your decency on the roadside could be the entry point. Instead of paying you for a spare tire, I want to pay it forward. We can help you save this place." Adam swallowed hard, guilt battling desperation. He didn't want to make a spectacle, but as he glanced at the battered goat shed and thought about Grace's college dreams, He wondered if it was prideful to refuse help when it was being offered in good faith. After a moment, he cleared his throat. I won't accept charity unless it helps others too. If your cameras come, I want my neighbors involved. They're hurting as bad as me, some even worse. Charlotte nodded thoughtfully. We can pitch that to Trevor, a community piece. Not just your story. Her gaze flicked to the orchard again, and Adam swore he saw tears brimming in her eyes. Whatever her life in the spotlight had been, it seemed she carried wounds of her own. Adam hesitated, then finally extended his hand. All right, Miss Hayes, let's see if your plan can help Dawson Farm and Maple County hold on just a bit longer. The next week flew by in a whirlwind of phone calls, emails, and cautious anticipation. Charlotte arranged for her producer friend Trevor Banks to visit Dawson Farm with a skeleton crew, just 3 other people, a camera woman, a sound tech, and a fixer who doubled as a carpenter. They planned to film for several weeks, capturing the gritty reality of a drought-stricken farm and the slow, painful process of restoration. Adam, not used to such bustle, found himself overwhelmed but committed to trying. Grace was tentatively excited, imagining how the documentary could highlight her goat-rearing project, maybe helping her scholarship odds. She spent an entire evening cleaning the cluttered corner of the barn, worried about how it would look on camera. But outside the farm, reactions were mixed. Some neighbors grumbled about outsiders with cameras. Others scoffed, convinced it was a stunt that would bring more trouble. An early taste of conflict arose when Adam tried to buy extra lumber at a discount from the local hardware store. Old man Lester behind the counter sneered. Heard you're playing movie star now, Dawson. Don't come crying when they twist your story on national TV. Adam felt the sting, not wanting to argue with a man he'd known for decades. Meanwhile, Charlotte made an effort to visit other farms. She introduced herself politely, explaining the documentary's purpose and asking if they'd like to be featured. Some politely declined, uneasy about cameras. Others agreed, hoping any publicity might spur donations or local government support for wells or irrigation improvements. One afternoon, Charlotte stopped by the feed store again and found Charlie Wilcox in deep conversation with a woman named Nancy Harding, a local official on the county council. Nancy frowned the moment Charlotte mentioned filming. We don't want Maple County turned into a sideshow. Nancy said, property taxes could skyrocket if outside developers see potential for tourism or big agribusiness. Charlotte's face fell, but she held her ground. We're not selling anything to major corporations. We're telling the story of real families, people like Adam, who just need some help. If anything, we might bring funding for better water management or local veterinarian services. Nancy Harding seemed unconvinced, shaking her head. I've been in office long enough to see how these things go. Cameras come in, folks get promises of quick fixes, then they leave. And the next year, we're stuck with the bill. Despite the chill from these encounters, Charlotte pressed forward. She told Trevor to keep the crew small, to remain respectful. The team arrived at Dawson Farm in a battered van. Adam watched them pile out with gear, carefully setting up a couple of tripods by the barn. Trevor, a lanky man with an eager grin, introduced himself with a firm handshake. We'll keep it minimal. Mr. Dawson, he promised. We're here to help, not to cause trouble. But trouble was brewing. The camera lens carried weight. It captured everything from Adam's worried glances to the dried-up stream behind the orchard. In a close-knit community suspicious of exploitation, that lens felt like a loaded gun. Adam could already sense the tension, and he hadn't even fully grasped the personal costs that might be demanded once the cameras started rolling and real repairs began. Over the next few days, Dawson Farm bustled with a flurry of activity that Adam found both exhilarating and nerve-wracking. Trevor's carpenter friend, Miguel, started by stabilizing the barn's roof, replacing rotten beams with fresh lumber. The sound of hammers echoed across the property at dawn, waking the goats and occasionally scaring them into a corner. Meanwhile, Grace helped the camera woman, Laurel, film segments about goat feeding and the daily challenges of drought. Charlotte pitched in wherever she could, lugging scraps of wood, fetching nails, and trying to absorb as much of farm life as possible. At first, Adam maintained a polite distance, monitoring from the sidelines. He worried about how the footage would be presented, whether it would turn him into some pitiable figure on a tearjerker TV special. The tension in his neck never fully eased, especially when he thought about the neighbors who might resent the attention. Part of him kept glancing at the truck window, expecting to see more official letters or an angry county council representative show up. One neighbor did arrive, but with friendship in mind. Amos Templeton, who owned the orchard next door, came by to chat with Charlotte about possibly showcasing his land. "I got some peach trees still hanging on," he said hopefully. "Maybe if folks see it on TV, we could raise money for a better irrigation system. My wife's father left me that orchard, and I hate watching it dry up." Charlotte listened with understanding. "We'll talk to Trevor, see if we can work your orchard into the story. The more local farms we highlight, the better." Amos left looking lighter, as though the slightest whiff of hope was enough to keep him going. Not everyone felt that way. Late one afternoon, as the crew wrapped filming, a battered pickup pulled into Dawson Farm, and out stepped Jimmy Nichols, a local with a notorious streak of cynicism. He glared at the cameras. "Here to make us all look like hillbillies," he snapped at Trevor. "Exploit our misery for ratings." Trevor tried to explain the nonprofit angle, the goal to help, but Jimmy scoffed. Adam intervened, gently ushering Jimmy back to his truck. "Let's talk it over. Man, I promise we're trying to do something good here," Adam said in a steady voice. Eventually, Jimmy left, still unconvinced, leaving a cloud of distrust in his wake. By the end of that day, the sky gathered dark clouds on the horizon, this time not empty thunder, but a genuine squall. A swirl of wind whipped at the fields, carrying the scent of ozone. Miguel hurried to secure his tools. Charlotte tugged at a tarp over the new lumber. As if on cue, lightning tore across the sky. It had been so long since any real storm had threatened Maple County that the dryness actually turned to fear. A lightning strike on parched ground could spark a wildfire. The rain arrived in a sudden deluge, battering the fresh lumber and sending rivulets of water gushing across the dusty yard. Grace whooped with laughter, half ecstatic at finally seeing precipitation, half terrified by the crack of thunder overhead. Adam rushed to cover the feed sacks, but as he did, a gust of wind ripped the tarp from his hands. A sheet of corrugated metal from the barn side tore loose and slammed into the orchard fence. Lightning flashed, illuminating Charlotte's worried face. All at once, the orchard's old well overflowed from the sudden downpour, sending muddy water surging through the rows of trees. Adam felt a sting of dread, too much in, too fast. They had prayed for rain, but this kind of explosive storm could cause flash floods. The crew scrambled to get cameras inside. The goats bleated in panic. The long-awaited water had arrived, but not in the gentle, life-saving way everyone had hoped. By midnight, the storm's fury began to recede, leaving Dawson Farm battered but upright. Rainwater pooled in places Adam had never seen flood before around the orchard fence, near the foundation of the goat shed, and even under the porch steps. A broken branch from an ancient walnut tree had smashed the side window of Charlotte's SUV, scattering glass on the soggy ground. Everyone was too exhausted to do more than throw towels on the biggest leaks. At dawn, the damage became heartbreakingly clear. The orchard fence had collapsed, allowing several goats to wander into the muddy grove, where they were trapped by the rising water. Adam, Grace, and Miguel worked to pull them free before they drowned. Sadly, 2 of the newer kids didn't survive. Grace held the limp body of one small goat, tears mingling with the mud on her face. Adam's jaw clenched in grief, guilt gnawing at him for not having better infrastructure in place. To make matters worse, one of Trevor's crew members, Laurel, had slipped on the wet barn floor during the storm and dislocated her shoulder. She was lying on an old couch inside the house, waiting for the local medic to arrive. Charlotte hovered nearby, wringing her hands, feeling responsible for bringing these people into such a hazardous situation. Trevor tried to comfort her, but she kept shaking her head. "This is all too real," she murmured. Adam's relief that the land had finally seen rain was smothered by the chaos it unleashed. 2 goats gone, an orchard fence destroyed, a film crew member injured, and fresh tears in Grace's eyes. That morning, as he and Charlotte walked the perimeter of the farm, the sun glinted off muddy puddles that looked more like tarnished mirrors. The ground swallowed each footstep with a squelch. "I'm so sorry," Charlotte said, voice trembling. "If we hadn't been here filming, maybe Adam cut her off. Don't blame yourself. The storm would have come anyway. We can't control the weather, or fate, or anything else that decides to shake us down." He paused, glancing over at Grace, who was stoically gathering tarps. "What matters is how we pull ourselves together after." The documentary aspect suddenly loomed larger. Trevor approached with a camera, but Adam raised a hand. "Not now, Trevor." The usual kind expression on Adam's face had hardened into the gaze of a man who'd lost too much to turn it into a spectacle. Trevor nodded, backing away. Of course, it was on. When the medic arrived, Laura was taken to the small hospital in town. Charlotte offered to drive her, since the SUV's window was shattered, but still drivable. Adam thanked her, exhaustion in his eyes. Before she left, Charlotte insisted on paying for any feed or medical costs, but Adam refused her money once again. "We're neighbors," he said firmly. Though his finances were near ruin, neighbors help each other. Despite Adam's words, the cracks in his world were evident. For Grace, losing 2 goats felt like an omen that the farm was doomed. For Charlotte, witnessing tragedy firsthand made her question if her involvement was a curse. And for Trevor's crew, they began to understand this was no simple feel-good rescue story. There were real consequences, real heartbreak, and real lives on the line. Grace Dawson had never felt more disheartened. She buried the 2 lost goat kids with trembling hands, tears leaving silent trails on her cheeks. Her entire 4-H dream had hinged on raising healthy goats as part of her portfolio for scholarships. Now, with the fence down and morale even lower, she feared the worst. But that very fear sparked a stubborn spark of determination. If her dad wouldn't accept help for the sake of pride, maybe she could rally the neighbors in a different way. That evening, while Adam and Miguel tried to salvage fence posts, Grace gathered Charlotte, Trevor, and the remaining crew around the farmhouse table. "What if we host a work day?" she proposed, voice still shaky from earlier tears. "No cameras, just the community. We invite folks over to help rebuild the fence, fix what's been broken by the storm. We don't ask for money or shoot any big scenes. We just show them we're all here for each other." Charlotte exchanged a glance with Trevor, who pursed his lips. "I respect that, Grace. But the network wants footage of repairs and community engagement." That's kind of the angle. Grace's determination sharpened. "If you film it, no one will come. They'll think it's another publicity stunt or that they're props in some show. We need a real connection. No lights, no cameras, just neighbors coming together." That's how Dad was raised. How I was raised. Trevor sighed, then looked at Charlotte. "We can do a day off filming. Might be good for morale anyway." Charlotte nodded, something in her eyes brightening. "Let's do it. I'll invite a few folks we've met. I promise not to mention cameras. We'll just say we need help with the orchard fence and barn repairs." Over the next couple of days, Grace and Charlotte made phone calls, visited local farms, left flyers at the feed store. The response was cautious at first. People liked the idea of helping, but the documentary looming over everything had sown mistrust. Amos Templeton was the first to confirm he'd show up. Then a local pastor called to say he'd bring volunteers. Gradually, Grace's phone lit up with messages from neighbors offering to bring nails, lumber, even food for lunch. Workday Sunday dawned with a cool breeze. The sky a benign shade of cornflower blue, no storm clouds in sight. Instead of cameras, Adam set out a table of coffee, donuts, and gloves. Trucks rumbled in, and after another, dropping off men, women, and teenagers with hammers, drills, and good intentions. Grace almost cried seeing Jimmy Nichols, former skeptic, pull in behind them, stepping out with a box of fencing staples. Together, they lifted fallen fence posts, hammered in new cross beams, and cleared debris from the orchard. A group of older ladies set up in the barn's shade, stitching feed sacks into protective covers for young saplings. The morning was filled with laughter and the steady rhythm of farm work. Charlotte moved among them like one of the locals, hair in a simple braid, jeans already stained with dirt. By noon, they'd accomplished more than Adam had in months alone. At the potluck lunch break, Grace overheard Jimmy telling another neighbor, "I guess these documentary folks ain't so bad. They let us do our thing, no cameras, no fuss." Adam caught Grace's eye across the orchard and gave her a rare, relieved smile. For a moment, it felt like the entire county had chosen to stand together. And in that quiet success, Grace felt a seed of hope taking root again in her heart. The following Monday, Adam found a letter in his mailbox from the Maple County Council, summoning him to a hearing on agricultural property assessment. The envelope's stern font made his stomach churn. Next to it was another envelope with an out-of-town return address, ArcLight Ag, a large agribusiness corporation rumored to be buying up farmland across several counties. Adam tore that one open first, scanning the formal language that basically said, "We'd like to discuss purchasing or leasing a portion of your land for an experimental greenhouse." The sum offered was more than enough to pay off his mortgage. With some left over on paper, it looked like a miracle check. Grace peered over his shoulder, frowning. "You can't really be considering that." Right, Adam didn't answer immediately. Memories of the storm's aftermath, the dead goats, and the constant weight of debt tugged at him. "We'll see," he murmured. That afternoon, Adam drove to the hearing at the county courthouse. Charlotte came along for moral support, though she kept a low profile by wearing a ball cap and sitting in the back. Trevor wanted to film, but Adam persuaded him not to, warning that cameras would only rile the officials further. Inside the wood-paneled chamber, a half-dozen council members sat in high-backed chairs. Nancy Harding, the council member Charlotte had met, led the questioning. She eyed Adam with a mixture of pity and skepticism. "Mr. Dawson, we understand you've been entertaining a film crew on your property and holding large gatherings. There are concerns about changes to property value and potential commercial use of farmland." Adam swallowed. "We held a volunteer workday, ma'am. No money changed hands. Just neighbors helping neighbors." "That's not the issue," Nancy said tersely. "The issue is potential rezoning or higher taxes if this documentary brings tourism or outside development. Maple County isn't prepared for a sudden influx of interest. Our roads need maintenance. Emergency services are stretched thin. You see our dilemma." Adam felt anger stir. "Ma'am, with respect, if more people see our struggles, maybe we'll get resources we've been denied for years. Better irrigation or a cooperative marketing system. Why fight it?" Nancy's gaze flicked briefly to Charlotte in the back row. "We're not fighting. We're just cautious. The board will consider an interim freeze on agricultural property expansions until we assess the real impact." As Adam stepped outside after the hearing, Charlotte caught up with him. "You okay?" He shrugged. "I guess. Just feels like they're using scare tactics to control what happens on my land. Meanwhile, I'm drowning in debt." Grace, who had come straight from school, joined them, panting from running up the courthouse steps. "Dad, are you really thinking about selling to that ArcLight Ag place?" she asked, voice trembling with worry. "They'd turn half our farm into a greenhouse for who knows what. That means we'd be living next to a lab, not farmland." Adam exhaled heavily. "I don't know. They offered a big check. Could pay off everything. Maybe even help neighbors. But it also means handing over a piece of our legacy." Charlotte cleared her throat. "In my experience, those big deals come with hidden strings." She fiddled with the brim of her cap. "I can't tell you what to do, Adam. But if you hold on a little longer, maybe we can raise enough money through the documentary without giving up your land." Adam looked torn. The dais cast a long shadow in the afternoon sun, metaphorically matching the uncertain future of Dawson Farm. Overhead, dark clouds hinted at another round of storms. He had to decide quickly or risk losing everything either to the bank, the county council, or a corporation's slick promises. Adam spent the next few days haunted by indecision. The broken orchard fence was now repaired, the barn roof reinforced, and the goats had somewhat recovered from the storm's shock. Yet the relief felt precarious, like stepping onto thin ice. Each morning, he watched the mail carrier drop off more notices, some from the county, some from the bank, and one more letter from Arclight Ag. This time, they sweetened the deal with talk of community investment, claiming they'd build high-tech greenhouses to employ local people. Adam knew enough to doubt those claims. Large corporations rarely had the heart of small towns in mind. Meanwhile, Grace poured her energy into preparing a video essay for a veterinary scholarship. She filmed herself next to her goats, two of which bore fresh scars from tangling with storm debris, discussing how she'd learned to treat minor wounds and detect signs of stress. Trevor caught wind of this and offered to help her produce a polished segment, but Grace declined. "They want to see authenticity, not perfect production," she said gently. Still, Charlotte managed to slip Grace a better microphone and a tripod to stabilize her phone's footage. All done discreetly, so the county wouldn't accuse them of filming without permission. As father and daughter sat down one evening to rewatch Grace's video, Adam felt a pang in his chest. She spoke with passion, referencing the goat's medical needs and her dream to bring veterinary services to rural places often overlooked. It dawned on him that her future hinged on the survival of this farm and perhaps a broader hope for communities like Maple County to remain viable. The next morning, a representative from Arclight Ag decided to show up unannounced. A slim man in a tailored suit hopped out of a hybrid SUV, stepping gingerly over the mud with expensive shoes. He introduced himself as Daniel Holt, brandishing a business card that practically gleamed in the sunlight. "Mr. Dawson," he said, shaking Adam's hand with a calculated grip, "we'd love to finalize your acceptance of our proposal. We can move forward quickly. Money in your account by next week." Adam stared at the barns, orchard, and goats for a long moment. "But Holt," he began, "is your company really prepared to help the entire community? Because if we do this, I want no forced buyouts of my neighbors, no crazy tax hikes." Holt plastered on a friendly smile. "We have philanthropic arms. Absolutely. We can look into a communal fund once we get the greenhouse operational." Adam tried not to scoff. Everything sounded so packaged, so corporate. No mention of farmland heritage or sustainable practice, just numbers and brand synergy. Grace hovered by the pickup, arms crossed, her disapproval radiating. "Let me think on it," Adam said finally, wanting the man off his property. Holt nodded curtly, leaving behind a glossy brochure filled with images of bright LED lights shining on rows of hydroponic lettuce. Once the SUV disappeared, Grace picked up the brochure, flipping through it with a grimace. "This is the future they're offering," she said quietly. "No mention of real soil, or livestock, or the history of Maple County. Just sterile chambers of vegetables." Adam set his jaw, torn between the easy money and the deeper calling to preserve what his family had built. The storm damage, the suspicious county council, and his towering debt weighed heavily on him. He couldn't shake the feeling that if he signed with Arclight Ag, he'd be betraying the memory of his wife, the dreams of his daughter, and the unspoken promise he'd made to Charlotte to keep the farm real and share its soul with the world, not sell it to the highest bidder. That weekend, Trevor and Charlotte cornered Adam with a new idea. They wanted to organize a small harvest festival, an event to celebrate the partial recovery of the farm while showcasing local produce, homemade crafts, and the goats that Grace was caring for. "We can do it in 3 weeks," Trevor said. "Just a one-day thing, open to folks around here and maybe a few from out of town who follow Charlotte's music. Proceeds will go toward paying the bank or assisting with orchard repairs. We'll film it as part of the documentary's climax showing the community's resilience." Adam stared at them as though they'd lost their minds. "A festival with my orchard half dead and the fields in ruin." Charlotte leaned forward, eyes bright. "That's the point, it's a symbol. We're not lying to people, this is still a land in need. But we can set up some stalls, play some music. If it goes well, we might draw enough attention to crowdfund or get philanthropic sponsors on board." Imagine how it could look on film, neighbors banding together, showcasing small improvements. It might also appease the county council, show them we can do something positive without letting corporate vultures take over. Grace, who was standing nearby, seemed intrigued. I could bake something, or maybe do goat demonstrations, show people how to handle small livestock injuries. Adam rubbed the back of his neck. I don't like big gatherings, especially with cameras. But if this helps raise enough money, he paused, remembering Daniel Holt's grin and the promise of quick cash. Let's do it. But keep it modest, you hear me? With that fragile agreement. The next days were filled with festival planning. Charlotte used her connections to invite a local folk band, while Trevor scouted suitable spots to place portable stages or booths. Amos Templeton agreed to bring what was left of his peaches. Other farmers chipped in produce or crafts. Even Jimmy Nichols grudgingly admitted he might sell homemade jerky. Yet, for every enthusiastic participant, there was someone else who doubted. Nancy Harding, from the county council, attended a brief planning meeting at the feed store. She pressed Charlotte with pointed questions about crowd sizes, parking, and whether the event would require a special permit. Trevor tried to reassure her, but Nancy countered. Even if it's small, you bring one or two well-known musicians, and next thing you know, we have hundreds of visitors on old back roads. Who's liable if someone gets hurt? Who foots the bill for county cleanup? Meanwhile, Adam found it harder to sleep at night. The orchard had begun to show signs of revival from the recent rain, though some trees were beyond saving. The goats were healthy again. Grace's gentle care had seen to that, but the farm's finances remained dire. A festival might bring in a quick influx of donations, but was it enough to cover all the arrears he would still have to face the bank? In his darkest moments, he felt pressure to sign ArcLight Ag's offer. If he sold even a portion of the land for the greenhouse, he could keep the homestead and orchard, but he'd lose that intangible sense of wholeness. And what if the greenhouse expanded, swallowing up Maple County piece by piece? In the quiet hours before dawn, he often found himself walking the orchard rows, remembering how his wife used to collect blossoms in her apron, humming a tune that drifted on the wind. He pictured Grace leaving for veterinary school, returning to find the orchard replaced by glass and steel structures. The thought left a bitter taste in his mouth. The morning of the harvest festival dawned clear, crisp and unexpectedly hopeful. Volunteers arrived early, setting up tables laden with homemade jams, honey from a local apiary, and a meager supply of peaches and apples from struggling orchards. The goats were penned near the old walnut tree, wearing little ribbons around their necks that Grace had tied. A small stage, hastily built from reclaimed wood, stood near the barn. Charlotte rigged up a portable sound system she had borrowed from a friend in Nashville. Trevor's team wove through the gathering, filming discreetly so as not to unsettle folks who distrusted cameras. By mid-morning, a modest crowd trickled in. Neighbors greeted each other warmly, sampling baked goods and exchanging stories of how the storms had both helped and hurt their fields. Kids giggled as they petted Grace's goats. Even Nancy Harding appeared, walking through the aisles with a cautious nod. Adam hovered at the edge of the orchard, half expecting some disaster to unfold. But so far, the event carried a gentle, almost nostalgic charm, like the county fairs of his youth, before budgets and bureaucrats shut them down. Around noon, Charlotte took the stage. She held her guitar with practiced ease, introduced herself plainly as just Charlotte, a friend of Dawson Farm, and began to play a soft, acoustic tune. The hush that fell over the crowd was profound. Her voice, husky with emotion, spoke of heartbreak, resilience, and roads that twist through dusty landscapes. Even Adam, who rarely listened to radio anymore, found himself standing transfixed. As Charlotte's song ended to a wave of applause, she cleared her throat, beckoning Adam to come up. This festival was his idea, in a roundabout way, she joked. Adam blushed, stepping onto the rickety stage. With a microphone thrust near his face, he stumbled over words of gratitude, praising everyone for showing up. He admitted, voice cracking, that a month ago he'd felt certain Dawson Farm was done for. The applause that followed felt like a collective promise that maybe the farm still stood a chance. In the back row, Adam spotted Daniel Holt from ArcLight Ag, quietly observing. A pang of dread clenched his stomach. The man had come uninvited. Did that mean trouble, or was he simply waiting to see if this festival was some kind of competition for what his corporation intended to offer? Adam tried not to let it ruin the mood. Then tragedy struck when a middle-aged volunteer named Sarah slipped on a wet patch near the orchard. She went down hard, landing on a rotted tree root. A sharp scream shattered the festival's gentle atmosphere. Adam rushed over, kneeling in the mud. Charlotte was close behind, practically dropping her guitar. Sarah clutched her leg, tears streaming, clearly in severe pain. Someone shouted for an ambulance, but the county's emergency services were notoriously slow. Grace hurried over with a rudimentary first aid kit, and Trevor's camera woman hovered uncertainly, unsure whether to film. Within minutes, the festival's mood shifted from joyous to somber. Attendees gathered in small clusters, whispering about how precarious everything seemed. Adam cradled Sarah's head, trying to comfort her until the volunteer rescue squad arrived. The orchard that had once symbolized revival now felt cursed. The festival itself stood on a knife's edge, uncertain if it would continue. Charlotte, feeling responsible, took the microphone again, voice quavering. "Accidents happen," she said softly, "but we're a community. We're here to help." Despite her reassurance, the crowd's warmth had cooled, replaced by a stark reminder of how little infrastructure the county truly had. As the sirens finally echoed through the hills, Adam closed his eyes, wondering if this half-successful, half-disastrous day would seal Dawson Farm's fate once and for all. Sarah was taken to the hospital, her leg broken in 2 places. The festival limped on with a subdued tone, and by late afternoon, most visitors headed home, leaving behind a handful of volunteers to clean up. Adam sat on a hay bale near the makeshift stage, chin in his hands, feeling the weight of the day. The orchard fence was intact. The goats were safe. But the festival profits, after paying for certain supplies, barely covered a fraction of what he owed the bank. Trevor tried to console him. "We got some good footage. People might donate online once we edit the final episode. We just need time," Adam exhaled, scanning the nearly empty yard. "Time is exactly what I don't have." Charlotte approached, cheeks flushed from singing and worrying. "We can push an emergency fundraiser link with the documentary's teaser. My manager has experience with that sort of campaign. I promise we'll do our best to get money flowing." She hesitated, adding softly, "It's not your fault, Adam. We did our best today." "You gave people hope." Grace joined them, wiping sweat from her brow. In her hand was a text message from a number she didn't recognize. "Dad, I think you need to see this." She handed him the phone. A single line read, "ArcLight rep here. My boss wants a final answer by Monday." Adam stared at the phone, a knot tightening in his chest. Monday was only 2 days away. He heard footsteps and looked up to see Daniel Holt lingering by the orchard's edge, arms folded. The man nodded in silent acknowledgement and disappeared into his sleek SUV. That evening, after the last volunteer left, Adam and Grace sat in the farmhouse kitchen with Charlotte. The air smelled of leftover funnel cakes and orchard mud. Grace fiddled with a broken piece of fence wire, as if distracting her hands from the dread in her heart. Charlotte cleared her throat. "Adam, I know this is none of my business, but that ArcLight guy seemed pretty eager. Are you really thinking about selling them part of the farm?" Adam let out a long breath. "I don't want to, but I owe the bank thousands, maybe more. The festival gave me a few hundred. If I accept ArcLight's deal, I could pay off the mortgage tomorrow." Grace's voice trembled. "And what about our orchard?" "Our goats," Om's memory, silence hovered, broken only by the hum of the fridge. Then, as if the universe sensed their despair, Grace's phone buzzed again, this time a different notification. She opened it, eyes going wide. "Dad, I got a scholarship, the Mapleton Veterinary Scholarship. Full tuition for in-state. They saw the video I sent." Her voice broke into a sob, tears streaming. "They actually picked me." Emotion surged in Adam. He wrapped Grace in a tight embrace, feeling tears of relief slip from his own eyes. For months, He'd been bracing himself against the world's harshness, and here at last was a genuine victory. Even Charlotte wiped her eyes, smiling through her own tears. For a brief moment, hope glimmered in that cramped kitchen. Grace's future was no longer shackled by finances. But as the initial joy ebbed, Adam's gaze drifted to the stack of bills on the counter. The farm's future remained in limbo. Scholarship or not, the land still faced foreclosure. Monday loomed like a dark cloud on the horizon. On Monday morning, Adam found himself standing outside the Maple County Bank. Clouds scudded across the sky, mirroring his turbulent mind. He wasn't alone. Charlotte insisted on accompanying him. Grace had class, but she made Adam promise to keep her updated. Trevor waited in the parking lot, camera off, but ready to capture a hopeful moment if one presented itself. Inside, Miss Kellerman greeted Adam with weary familiarity. She led him to a small office where the bank board convened three men in suits, exchanging polite nods. Adam sat stiffly, wrinkling the letter from Arclight Ag in his hand. "Mr. Dawson," began the board spokesman, "we understand you've been approached by an agribusiness to sell or lease part of your land. We also know your mortgage is in serious arrears. Are you here to finalize acceptance of that deal and pay off your debt?" Adam inhaled slowly. "I'm here to ask for more time." Just a bit more. The board members exchanged skeptical glances. One frowned. "And how do you propose to pay everything you owe?" "We can't keep extending you indefinitely." Adam cleared his throat, heart pounding. He set aside the Arclight letter. "I've got a documentary in progress that might raise funds. A festival we held brought some revenue. There's also an online campaign starting soon. My daughter just won a scholarship, which means our household expenses will be lower. If you give me a short grace period, say 90 days, I believe I can catch up." A pause filled the room, tension thick enough to cut with a knife. One board member shook his head, about to speak, when Charlotte gently pushed open the office door. She had her phone out, open to an email from her manager. "Sir," she addressed the board quietly, "I'd like you to see this." She handed over the phone. On the screen was an email chain showing a major philanthropic sponsor, one Charlotte had performed for in the past, pledging a substantial donation to the Dawson Farm cause once the documentary aired, enough, at least, to make a real dent in the mortgage. Charlotte's contact had come through at the 11th hour. The board studied the email, muttering among themselves. Finally, the spokesman rubbed his temples. "This is not the usual procedure, Miss Hayes. However, if this money is guaranteed and arrives within the next few months, we might work out a short-term extension, but no more freebies. This is it." Adam exhaled in shaky relief. He rose, shook each board member's hand, and promised not to let them down. As he and Charlotte stepped outside, Trevor approached, eyes bright. So Adam cracked a small smile. 90 days. Looks like we won't be signing away the orchard just yet. The sense of triumph was tempered by exhaustion. Adam still had to ensure the documentary's success in the sponsor's pledge. But at least he had a lifeline, something other than Arclight's sterile greenhouse plan. That evening, back at the farm, the sky was painted in soft oranges and purples. The orchard glowed with a lingering warmth, goats meandering peacefully in the pasture. As dusk fell, Charlotte pulled out her guitar near the barn. She asked Adam if he would sit with her a moment. She started playing a new tune, gentle chords that seemed to cradle the night air. The lyrics spoke of a dusty road, a farmer's tired hands, and a moment of roadside grace that sparked a second chance. Adam closed his eyes, listening, tears threatening at the corners. For a second, and he saw his wife smile, felt Grace's hopeful gaze, and sensed the land itself exhaling in relief. The last notes faded, leaving behind a hush that felt like a prayer answered. Still, Adam knew their struggles weren't over. The orchard needed years of care. The orchard fence might collapse again. Storms would keep rolling in. But for the first time in a long while, he believed in tomorrow. He believed that what began as a flat tire on a lonely stretch of road might truly save Dawson Farm and maybe even Maple County. Winter came softly that year, as though nature decided to give Maple County a break after so much upheaval. Frost lay across the orchard in delicate patterns, each blade of grass etched with silver. Adam rose early each morning, checking on the goats with a renewed sense of gratitude. Grace headed off to her final high school semester, scholarship papers already signed and sealed. The knowledge that she had a real future ahead buoyed Adam's spirits. By the time Christmas lights twinkled on porches, Trevor and his tiny crew had finished editing the documentary's pilot episode. They decided to release a short teaser online to gauge interest. The teaser featured close-ups of the orchard's struggle, glimpses of Charlotte singing in the barn, and the day of the volunteer work effort. Within a week, thousands of people had shared it. Donations trickled in from strangers across the country who were moved by the raw honesty of a farmer trying to save his legacy. Charlotte's philanthropic sponsor made good on their word. The bank received a lump sum that placed Adam within striking distance of paying off his arrears. In a moment of quiet triumph, Ms. Kellerman from the bank visited the farm, congratulating him on the documentary's success. "I never thought I'd see the day," she admitted with a smile, handing him papers that granted an official extension, a manageable payment plan. As for Arclight Ag, they backed off for the moment, sending Adam a polite letter of withdrawal. No doubt they'd find another farm to purchase, but Dawson Farm was no longer a desperate target. If anything, the budding publicity made Maple County less enticing for covert corporate takeovers. The county council, for their part, remained cautious, yet somewhat mollified by the positive attention. Nancy Harding still had reservations about potential traffic and tourism, but she also recognized that new funds might improve roads and emergency services. Meanwhile, Grace's goats flourished. She turned one section of the barn into a mini-clinic, practicing under the guidance of a local veterinarian, Dr. Alvarez. In a poignant moment, Dr. Alvarez offered Grace a part-time assisting job after school. Her eyes shone when she relayed the news to Adam: paid work, relevant experience, and all in service of the animal she loved. On a clear January afternoon, Charlotte prepared to leave Maple County for a brief tour, rejuvenated by her time at the farm. She promised to return in the spring for further filming, ensuring they captured the orchard's slow rebirth. Before she climbed into her SUV, this time fully repaired, she handed Adam a small metal wrench with a ribbon tied around the handle. "Found this in my trunk," she teased, smiling. "Never know when you might need to fix another flat tire." Adam chuckled, tucking it into his coat pocket. "I'll keep it close," he said. "Thanks for everything, Charlotte, you, Trevor, the crew. You gave us a chance to keep fighting." She blinked back tears, hugging him fiercely. Then, with a soft wave to Grace, she drove off. In the rearview mirror, Maple County's farmland stretched in humble resilience, no longer a sun-scorched wasteland, but a place of cautious promise. A month later, as the final snowfall melted into the orchard rows, Grace discovered new buds forming on branches that once looked dead. She grabbed her phone to film it, excited to show Dr. Alvarez and the documentary team. Adam joined her, resting a calloused hand on her shoulder. Together, they studied the tiny green buds, harbingers of a new season neither of them had dared hope for. In the farmhouse, pinned to the fridge next to the mortgage statements, was a Polaroid of a tire lying flat on a lonely country road. Below it, scrawled in Grace's handwriting, was the simple phrase, "Sometimes all it takes is stopping to help." Adam read it every morning, letting the words remind him how a single act of kindness had changed their trajectory. He thought of Charlotte's song, the festival, the heartbreak, and the healing. The orchard might never be as abundant as it was in his grandfather's day, but it was alive, and so were they, forging forward in faith and resilience. And so Dawson Farm entered spring with an open horizon. Seeds of hope took root, nourished by honest labor and the unwavering bond of a community that finally believed in second chances. In the end, it was never about acres or debts, cameras or headlines. It was always about the quiet strength that binds a family to their land, neighbors to neighbors, and strangers through moments of simple grace. The orchard began to bloom again, slowly, hesitantly, scarred branches bearing fragile buds like promises whispered to the wind. But recovery had its price: the storm's wrath, the whispered judgments, the weight of debts that tested faith in every step forward. And though the land healed, certain scars never faded completely. Some victories felt bitter, some losses lingered like unfinished songs. Yet beneath it all ran an unbroken truth: kindness, given without expectation, echoes far beyond the fields where it first took root. A tire changed on a lonely road, a helping hand offered without hesitation. These were the seeds that blossomed into resilience, into hope renewed. Tonight, beneath a canopy of stars, a farmer stands quietly, watching new growth sway gently under moonlight. He wonders, just as we all might, how different the world could be if each of us took one small moment to help another, expecting nothing in return. What if your smallest act of kindness became someone else's lifeline?